Are you struggling to create nested forms with validation in Angular 2? You're not alone. Many developers face this challenge, and today we're going to break it down step by step. I understand how frustrating it can be when you follow the documentation, but still can't get it to work. This is a common issue, especially when dealing with complex forms and child components. Let's look at the specific question at hand. One user asked, how can I achieve a nested form with validation in Angular 2, especially with child components? They want to create a parent form that includes a child component for additional inputs. Sound familiar? Let's dive into this. So what's the issue here? The user has a working form but wants to decouple the functionality into a separate child component. This can be tricky, but once you understand how Angular handles reactive forms, it becomes much clearer. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding of how to set up nested forms in Angular 2, and I promise you'll feel more confident in your coding skills. To begin solving the user's issue, we need to ensure that the parent component is correctly set up to include the child component. The user should modify the parent component's HTML to include the child component within the form group. Next, the user needs to ensure that the parent component's TypeScript file correctly initializes the form group for the child component. This involves creating a nested form group for the dummy input. Now, the user should focus on the child component. The child component needs to receive the form group from the parent. This can be done by using an input property to pass the form group down. Finally, the user should ensure that the child component's HTML correctly binds to the passed form group. This will allow the child component to manage its own input validation. With these changes, the user should now have a functioning nested form with validation. They can test the form by entering values and checking if the validation works as expected. Fun fact, did you know that Angular was developed by Google? It's a powerful framework that can make your web applications shine once you get the hang of it. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative approach to handling nested forms in Angular 2 is to bind the child component to the same form group as the parent. This can be done by passing the form group from the parent component to the child component using an input property. Now, let's dive into a different answer from another user. This user suggests treating form groups and controls as JavaScript objects and arrays. They propose a dynamic form construction approach where the form is divided into sections, each containing its own fields and labels. The form schema is received as a JSON object from a service, and the structure includes a main form group that encompasses multiple sections. The user emphasizes the importance of having a clear hierarchy, where the form schema contains multiple sections, and each section holds multiple fields. They provide code snippets for the main form group and section forms, illustrating how to build the structure effectively. Let's check out another perspective from a different user. An alternative approach shared by another user involves accessing the parent form in a child component. They suggest using the control container and form group directive to get a reference to the parent form. This method allows the child component to interact with the parent form's controls effectively. Let's take a look at another answer from another user. An alternative solution provided by another user involves creating a directive called parent provider. This directive uses Angular's control container to manage the form controls in a parent-child relationship. By applying the parent provider directive to a div, it allows child components to access the parent form's controls seamlessly. That's all for that response. Let's see what someone else had to say. An alternative approach to managing nested forms in Angular is to use control container instead of form group directive. This method allows you to access the form group directly from the child component without needing to pass it through multiple parent components. This allows you to set the form group in any parent component, making it available to the child components without the need for multiple at-input bindings. Here's a pro tip. Always ensure that your form controls are properly linked between parent and child components. This will save you a lot of headaches down the line. And there you have it. You should now have a solid understanding of how to create nested forms with validation in Angular 2. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe for more tips and tricks.